Hard work is the story the poor tell their children and the wealthy quietly abandoned. It keeps most people busy, compliant, and too exhausted to notice the actual mechanics of accumulation. The engine of wealth was never effort. It was always design. Most people have been running a race they were never meant to win. Not because they lack discipline, not because they started with nothing. Plenty of people started with nothing and built something significant, but because the race itself was constructed to reward something other than what they were told. You were taught that the path to financial freedom runs through your output. Hours logged, promotions earned, late nights justified by the promise of eventual comfort. And here is what makes that belief so difficult to release. It is not entirely false. Hard work can move you forward. It simply cannot, on its own, move you up. That distinction is everything. Machiavelli wrote in The Prince that men are so thoroughly deceived by appearances that the one who deceives will always find those willing to be deceived. The appearance here is meritocracy, the idea that wealth follows effort in a roughly proportional relationship. It is a compelling appearance. It is the appearance most institutions want you to maintain, and the moment you stop examining it, it begins to manage you. The first thing to understand is that effort and leverage operate on entirely different scales. Consider two people in the same city, both earning well. One is a senior editor at a publishing firm, respected, skilled, genuinely good at what she does. Her income depends entirely on her continued presence. Every day she doesn't work is a day she doesn't earn. The second person owns a small portfolio of digital assets that generate licensing revenue. He is not more talented. He is not more disciplined. He has simply arranged his relationship with income differently. When both of them get sick, one of them falls behind. The other does not. That is not luck. That is design. The psychological cost of ignoring this is subtle but relentless. Every year you optimize your performance without examining your position, you become more skilled at operating within a system that was not designed to deliver you wealth. You become better at a game whose prize has already been allocated. The effort intensifies, the return narrows, and what most people feel, that quiet frustration at doing everything right and still not advancing, is not a personal failure. It is the correct emotional response to a structural mismatch they were never taught to name. The second pattern is what might be called deferred identity. Most people treat wealth as a future destination rather than a current orientation. They work toward eventually being the kind of person who thinks about assets, leverage, and positioning. The wealthy do not defer that identity. They inhabit it regardless of their current balance sheet. This is not about affirmation or performance. It is about the decisions made when no one is watching. Someone with a deferred wealth identity negotiates their salary and immediately thinks about what to spend. Someone with a current wealth identity negotiates their salary and immediately thinks about what to redirect. The question being asked is different. The decision is different. The compounding effect over a decade is enormous. Here is where most people stop themselves from seeing clearly. The belief that identity should follow achievement, that you become a wealth-oriented thinker once you have accumulated wealth, is the exact inversion of how accumulation actually works. You do not think differently once you arrive. You arrive because you began thinking differently before there was any evidence you should. Stop for a second, not to reflect, to audit. Most people reading their financial situation honestly would find this. Years of increasing skill, increasing income, and a net worth that has not moved in proportion to either. The raises came. The promotions came. The lifestyle quietly expanded to absorb them. And somewhere in that expansion, the question of position, of how the money was structured, not just earned, was never seriously asked. That is not laziness. That is the natural result of a system that rewards you just enough for performing well that you never feel the urgency to perform differently. The question is not whether you have been working hard. The question is whether the design of your financial life could function, even partially, without you in it. If the honest answer is no, that is the only number that matters right now. The third pattern is risk asymmetry, and it is perhaps the most misunderstood concept separating the wealthy from the merely hardworking. Most people treat risk as something to be avoided, an unstable region between where they are and some theoretically better place. The wealthy treat risk as a variable to be managed, calibrated, and strategically accepted. The difference in outcome is not incidental. Avoiding risk is itself a risk. Staying in a comfortable position that produces linear income is a choice with a compounding cost, and that cost rarely becomes visible until the window for changing course has quietly closed. The mortgage is too large. The commitments are too specific. The optionality that once existed has been slowly traded away for the appearance of security. If what's been said here has shifted something for you, the next video on this channel goes deeper into the specific decision frameworks the wealthy use to evaluate options that most people never recognize as decisions at all. Subscribe, because the gap between understanding this and acting on it has a closing window, and most people only notice it after it has shut. The fourth pattern is the social cost of visibility. Most people do not pursue wealth strategies because those strategies are invisible in their immediate social environment. The choices that build leverage, starting a small income stream outside of employment, acquiring an asset, restructuring time toward learning rather than performing. These do not generate the social reinforcement that makes a behavior feel legitimate. Nobody applauds you for spending a Saturday learning how a holding company works instead of attending the event. Nobody validates the decision to underperform socially in order to overperform financially. The wealthy rarely have to fight this friction. Their environment has already normalized the choices that build leverage. The people around them do the same things. There is nothing unusual to defend. For everyone else, the absence of that reinforcement is not just inconvenient. It is, over time, genuinely erosive. Every unconventional financial decision made in a conventional social environment requires a small act of internal resistance. Most people can sustain that resistance for a while. Very few can sustain it indefinitely without either changing the environment or eventually being pulled back by it. Machiavelli understood the weight of social conformity not as a weakness, but as a mechanism of control. A population that regulates itself through the approval of its peers requires very little direct management. The wealthy, or more precisely, those in the process of becoming wealthy, must be willing to make choices that register as strange, antisocial, or incomprehensibly cautious within the social mirror they inhabit. That tolerance for social friction is not a personality trait. It is a skill, and it is acquirable. The fifth pattern concerns the relationship between time and money, not the advice about it, but the psychology underneath. Most people, if they are being precise about it, will admit that their relationship with free time is slightly uncomfortable, not because they are lazy, but because somewhere in the wiring, unstructured time carries a faint signal of guilt. Time not being sold feels like time being wasted. That feeling is not accidental. It was installed early, through every system that measured your value by your output and rewarded you for staying busy. The wealthy relationship with time is not about working less. It is about ensuring that some portion of time is always compounding, quietly building something that does not require your presence to keep moving. Most people never build that portion, not because they lack the hours, because they were never taught to treat those hours as anything other than recovery time between performances. And so the hours pass, and the performances continue, and the structure underneath never changes, because the only time that could have changed it was silently reclassified as rest. The sixth and final pattern is what could be called the intelligence misdirect. This is the one that tends to land hardest, because it targets the people who are most aware, most analytical, and most convinced that understanding something is equivalent to benefiting from it. Intelligence, genuine, sophisticated intelligence, can become the most elegant prison available. The person who reads about wealth strategy, understands the psychology of compounding, can articulate the difference between assets and income, and yet makes no structural change in their financial life. that person is not lacking knowledge. They are using knowledge as a substitute for action, and the substitution feels indistinguishable from progress. The brain engaged in understanding produces almost the same satisfaction signal as the brain engaged in doing. Almost. And that gap, between the satisfaction of comprehension and the discomfort of execution, is where most intelligent people quietly stall. The irony is precise, and Machiavelli would have appreciated it. The very quality that makes a person capable of understanding wealth psychology becomes, if left unexamined, the mechanism that prevents them from applying it. Intelligence without structural commitment is simply a more sophisticated form of standing still. The wealth gap in English-speaking countries is not primarily a skills gap. It is not, in most cases, an effort gap. It is a design gap. The people on one side of it have arranged their financial lives around principles of leverage, positioning, and compounding. The people on the other side have arranged their financial lives around principles of performance and reward. Both are working. Only one of them is also building. You were told hard work was the answer. The answer to what exactly was never made clear. Hard work is excellent preparation for more hard work. It will keep you solvent, respected, and perpetually one restructure away from having to start again. The structural question, not how to work harder, but how to work within a design that generates more than you directly produce, was kept just out of reach. Not maliciously in most cases. Simply because those who knew it had little incentive to share it, and those who didn't know it had nothing to share. The most dangerous person in any system is not the one who is angry about the rules. It is the one who has quietly stopped believing the rules were written for their benefit.